the David Lynch movies I've seen, and Twin Peaks' Fire Walk With Me is now the only one I haven't seen yet, Wild at Heart is definitely in the top 5, even so, it's not great. This 1990 romantic drama follows Sailor, Nicolas Cage, and Lula, Laura Dern, two lovers driving to California together, much to the horror of Lula's obsessive mother Marietta, Diane Ladd, who happens to be Dern's mother in real life. Marietta decides to hire a hitman if she can't keep them apart. Blue Velvet has, for better or worse, become my main point of reference for critiquing David Lynch's movies. See my review of Lost Highway for a detailed example of this in action. But for those of you who haven't seen that video, here's a test run. I happen to like Dune more than Blue Velvet because it's fun, exciting, visually marvelous, and has cool effects and action, but is it objectively better than Blue Velvet? No, probably not. So, how does Wild at Heart compare to Blue Velvet? Wild at Heart surpasses Blue Velvet on two major aspects, romance and villains. J.E. Freeman, who I mistook for Michael Ironside at first, is understated and rarely seen yet absolutely chilling as Santos, and Willem Dafoe, as criminal Bobby Peru, is an incredibly slimy and manipulative figure. Bobby progresses as a bad guy throughout the film. He is smarmy and contemptible from the moment he is introduced, and appears to have hidden intentions toward Sailor and Lula, but the depths of his depravity are revealed a little later, as he sexually assaults Lula and betrays Sailor during a heist. In my opinion, this escalation of horridness makes Bobby Peru from Wild at Heart more interesting and subtle, and his actions more shocking, than Frank Booth from Blue Velvet, who is, again, pretty much a one-note, unchanging psychopath for the entire film. What about the romance in Wild at Heart? Unlike the relationship between Jeffrey and Dorothy in Blue Velvet, which I just didn't get, Sailor and Lula have a very convincing, touching romance. Nicolas Cage and Laura Dern have fantastic chemistry together, as it's clear that they adore each other with both an intense erotic passion and a deep, tender respect. Lula doesn't have much of a character beyond being a hip, rebellious girl, but Sailor is a cool cat and a genuinely decent man, despite his tendency to break the law and get into serious trouble. Besides, Nicolas Cage, along with Crispin Glover, who cameos as Lula's cousin, I think, in a flashback, is probably the perfect crazy actor for Lynch's crazy material. It's quite uplifting to see Sailor and Lula's love triumph over bad omens, the people plotting against them, and Sailor's own self-destructive behavior. Wild at Heart has great villains and a wonderful love story at its core, but these elements highlight how insubstantial the rest of the film is. Early in the film, Santos, the gangster Marietta enlisted to track down and kill Sailor, contacts a man named Mr. Reindeer, who hires Bobby Peru in turn, as we learn later, to kill Sailor. Mr. Reindeer is a rich, dapper elderly man who surrounds himself with decorative topless women and is the leader of some kind of affluent crime organization or secret society that communicates in silver dollars. I was really enjoying this surreal feature, as it felt like a more serious, darker version of the criminal underworld depicted in Blue Velvet, which came across to me as unnecessarily goofy. But this intriguing, mysterious secret society and its charismatic leader are almost completely discarded, as they are never seen again and are hardly mentioned after the first act. For that matter, Santos only has a couple of scenes, meaning that Freeman's deeply unnerving performance is wasted. Mr. Reindeer and his crime enterprise are a fascinating plot thread that the film brings up and then gets rid of, which is disappointing, as I wanted to see more of it. The rest of the surrealism also feels pointless and out of place. I've called out pointless surrealism in Lynch movies before, but the squeaky-voiced guy who quacks like a duck, the mentally handicapped man and his dog, the obese porn performers, the deranged weirdos who kill Marietta's boyfriend, some cryptic lines of dialogue, and so on, all stick out as forced and distracting, especially since Wild at Heart is a pretty straightforward, grounded movie otherwise. The surrealism in Wild at Heart isn't relevant and doesn't really contribute to any kind of useful mood. Lula drops the film's title by saying that
this whole world's wild at heart and weird on top.
but since the film's central love story is fairly standard, this surrealism shows that their world is wild only at the periphery. In Wild at Heart, Lynch is trying too hard to be weird and unsettling through his surrealism. Though it doesn't hinder the pacing to any great degree, the result is still annoying and incongruent with the relatively normal main story of rebellious lovers. And that brings us back to the main problem of Wild at Heart. It has a beautiful love story going for it, but that's really all it has. Is that, with Cage and Dern's strong acting and chemistry together, their very natural dialogue, and the engaging ups and downs of their relationship, enough to make this a good, enjoyable movie?
Oh yes, most certainly.
But the tantalizing yet abandoned Mr. Reindeer plot thread, the cool yet underused villains, and all the bizarre filler make this an uneven, slightly frustrating watch. During a fun discussion that has yet to be released, my friend Marco explained that he considers Skyfall to be a good movie, but not a good James Bond movie. I'm in mostly the same mindset regarding Wild at Heart. I've made a qualitative distinction between films made by Lynch and Lynchian-style films by him, to use the adjective that labels his style. Wild at Heart is a good movie in general, but the forced and annoying surrealism mean that it is a poor example of Lynch's style. In other words, it's a good movie but not a good Lynch movie. Wild at Heart earns 3.5 stars out of 5. Thanks for watching. Cheers.